The sun hung low over the barren planet, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. From a cliff edge, a lone figure crouched, surveying the horizon with a scope. The wind tugged at his camouflage cloak, but he paid it no mind. His eyes were fixed, narrowed against a distant target. To anyone watching, he would have seemed like a ghost, a figure of stillness in a world that knew no peace. Luca Shadow Striker had made a name for himself across the galaxy, not through grand speeches or epic battles, but through death. He was a sniper, and he was known for two things: precision and silence. To the Galactic Empire, he was an enigma, an enemy they couldn't kill. To the universe at large, he was a shadow in the dark, a myth perhaps, but one that still lingered in the nightmares of those who had the misfortune to cross his path. Luca had never been part of any army. He didn't care for the politics of war or the empty promises of generals and admirals. Instead, he had forged his own path, working as a mercenary, a hired gun for the highest bidder. His talent was unmatched. A sniper whose kill count was so high it was rumored even the Empire's most elite assassins wouldn't dare take him on. His reputation, forged in blood, had spread to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. No one knew his true face. To most, he was a faceless name, a whisper in the dark corners of cantinas and war rooms. He was the one you called when you needed someone gone, someone erased from existence. But there was no glory in it for Luca. It was a job, nothing more. His quiet existence was all he ever wanted, though the price of such a life was loneliness, something he had long since accepted. It wasn't always this way. Luca had once been a soldier, a young recruit in a military that had promised him a chance to prove himself. He had been idealistic then, eager to serve, to fight for something greater than himself. But the war had chewed him up and spat him out. It had taken everything, his comrades, his family, his hope, and in their place, it had left him with one thing: a razor-sharp focus on survival. The sniper's rifle, an extension of himself, rested in his hands like a trusted companion. He checked the wind velocity, adjusted the scope, and then, for the briefest of moments, let himself feel the weight of the world. His target was close. He could feel the hairs on his neck prickle, as if sensing something more than just the usual tension before a kill. He was good at what he did, no doubt. But as he lay there waiting, something gnawed at him, an unfamiliar sense of unease. It was a feeling he had learned to suppress over the years, but today it refused to be ignored. The kill was simple, as they always were. The target was a corrupt official, a man whose blood was worth a small fortune. Yet there was something about this one that felt different, something just beyond his reach, just outside his grasp. As the target fell, a sharp crack of gunfire split the air, and Luca's finger pulled the trigger in perfect synchrony. The man dropped to the ground lifeless, his body crumpling like a rag doll. But it wasn't the fall of the man that held Luca's attention. It was the faint hum of a cloaked ship, barely visible against the stars. The sniper didn't flinch. Instead, he remained still, unblinking, scanning the skies for what he knew was coming. Across the galaxy, the Empire's intelligence had long since placed a target on Luca's back. They had tried and failed to eliminate him on more than one occasion. Each time, their assassins had been outsmarted, outgunned, or simply too slow. But Luca knew that would only last for so long. The Empire had infinite resources and patience, after all. The Emperor wasn't known for his mercy. The assassin team sent after Luca had been diverse, some human, some alien, all trained in the art of killing. They were the best the Empire could offer, and each had returned with a story of how they'd gotten close, only to fail. Some were never seen again. Others left with the scars of their failed missions, both physical and psychological. But no matter how many times they tried, no matter how many agents the Empire threw at him, they had all met the same fate. Death, often at his hand, though always swift and precise. Luca didn't consider himself a hero. To him, this was just the way of things. He had survived because he was better, and he had learned from each near miss. It was a brutal and lonely existence, but one he had embraced. But now, a new team was coming. This time, they were different. They had been hunting him for months, and reports had begun to surface of their increasing desperation. Word was, they were better equipped than anyone before them. They had access to the latest in cloaking technology, drones that could track even the faintest of heat signatures, and enough firepower to reduce a mountain to rubble. Luca's hand tightened around the rifle stock. He hadn't taken them seriously at first, but now, as he waited on the cliff's edge, the first whispers of doubt began to creep in. The Empire's assassins had learned from their failures, and they were coming for him with everything they had. He wouldn't go down easy. That much he knew. But for the first time in years, he wondered whether he could avoid this fight, whether he could stay hidden in the shadows forever. The thought didn't sit well with him. And so, as the wind swept across the barren landscape, Luca's shadow Stryker readied himself for a battle that was almost inevitable, a battle he might not survive, a battle against those who would stop at nothing to see him dead. And for the first time, the sniper wasn't sure if he would come out of it alive. The Empire's new assassins were unlike any Luca had faced before. Where previous teams had been a mix of desperation and arrogance, this group was methodical, disciplined, and eerily quiet. They moved like shadows themselves, their presence as unsettling as the endless night. Each of them had a story, though none of those stories were meant to be told. They were professionals in the truest sense of the word, trained to kill and to do so with efficiency. The leader, a tall humanoid by the name of Kalen, was as cold and calculating as the Empire itself. His face was a mask of perfect composure, but his eyes gleamed with an icy determination that bespoke years of ruthless training. His reputation preceded him. Kalen had earned the title, the Perfect Hunter, after eliminating dozens of high-profile targets across the galaxy. His skill was unmatched, his tactical mind brilliant, and his loyalty to the Empire unshakable. He had been tasked with one thing: bring Luca Stryker to an end once and for all. The team was hand-picked, each assassin chosen for their unique talents and their ability to work as one cohesive unit. There was Selena, a former assassin from a rogue faction of bounty hunters, known for her deadly agility and penchant for close-quarters combat. She was a ghost in the dark, capable of slipping past even the most vigilant sentries. Then there was Graf, a hulking brute of a man whose strength was rivaled only by his thirst for blood. He carried a massive energy sword that could cut through almost anything, metal, flesh, bone, with ease. Finally, there was Zero, a quiet technician with an uncanny understanding of high-tech weaponry. He was a team strategist, responsible for using the Empire's advanced cloaking devices and drones to track Luca's every move. Together, they made a perfect team, and they were closing in. From their hidden position aboard an Imperial stealth ship, Kalen watched the feed from the advanced surveillance drones as they swept across the barren landscape. Luca Stryker was the target, and he had been on the move for days. The team had spent weeks analyzing his patterns, studying his every move. They knew he was a creature of habit, always choosing places that provided an advantage: high ground, difficult terrain, places where his skill with a sniper rifle gave him the upper hand. Kalen knew he had to outthink him. He couldn't just rely on brute force. They had to approach with precision. The drone's infrared scan showed the outline of a figure in the distance, Luca, no doubt. His heart rate was steady, calm as always. Kalen couldn't help but admire that. The sniper didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He waited, poised and ready. Approaching from the north, Kalen murmured, eyes fixed on the screen. Zero, activate the cloaking system. Graf, you're on standby. Selena, take point. Zero nodded, fingers flying over the holographic interface, initiating the stealth field that would render the ship invisible to Luca's advanced sensors. The team was now completely undetectable. They moved swiftly, like predators closing in on their prey, aware that even the slightest sound, the smallest misstep, could give them away. As they descended through the thick atmosphere, Kalen's mind raced. The sniper was close, but Kalen didn't think he would just lie down and wait to die. Luca was too experienced for that. No! The real question was whether they could outmaneuver him. They had the technology, the strategy, and the numbers. All they needed now was a kill. Selena was the first to touch the ground, her boots barely making a sound as she crouched low, blending into the environment. Her keen eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any movement, any hint of the sniper's presence. She was good. Maybe the best at stealth, capable of disappearing in plain sight. And yet, as she moved through the landscape, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Graf, on the other hand, didn't share her concern. He was a tank, and he wasn't afraid of much. His role was simple. If things went sideways, he would clear the path. His massive frame was covered in reinforced armor, a walking fortress. He was used to the chaos of battle, to smashing his way through anything that stood in his path. But something about this mission felt different. It wasn't the usual kind of hunt. Something about the silence felt wrong. Zero's voice came over the comms, breaking the quiet tension. I've hacked into his system. He's not using any advanced detection methods. No traps or secondary layers of security. He's too confident. Kalen's lips curled into a grim smile. Good. Let's keep it that way. The group moved forward, their every step a careful calculation. They were now within striking distance of the sniper, and Kalen knew it was only a matter of time before they found him. His team had trained for weeks for this. They knew the risks. They knew the terrain. They knew Luca. But there was something else, something unspoken that gnawed at the back of Kalen's mind. The sniper wasn't just another target. He was the one who had eluded them all. In the distance, a glint of metal caught Kalen's eye. He knew instantly that it was Luca's rifle, mounted on a rocky outcrop. The sniper was already prepared, already waiting. A wisp of wind shifted the dust in the air, and for a moment, the silence was broken by the faintest click, a sound so soft it could have been the crack of a twig underfoot. Kalen raised a hand, signaling for his team to stop. He motioned toward the rock formation. Selena was the first to move, her lithe body blending into the shadows as she approached. The others followed in silence. The tension was palpable, each step bringing them closer to the end game. Kalen's gaze never left the ridge, his fingers lightly brushing the hilt of his blade. He could feel it in his bones. This would be the moment that would define everything. Luca was a legend, and Kalen was determined to be the one to bring that legend to an end. And yet, as they drew closer, Kalen's unease only deepened. The closer they got, the more the sense of foreboding gnawed at him. For all their technology, all their preparation, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than a simple hunt. It was only when they were nearly in position that Kalen realized what had been bothering him all along. They hadn't been the ones tracking Luca. They'd been the ones being tracked. The moment the realization struck, Kalen's heart sank. A soft rustling in the dry wind, followed by the faintest click of metal, was all it took. It wasn't the sound of their prey preparing for an ambush. It was the sound of something else, a warning, a signal, perhaps. It wasn't supposed to be like this. They had the advantage. Superior technology, strategic positioning, and a coordinated approach. But in the space between the beat of Kalen's heart, everything seemed to shift. Selena, her face set in a mask of concentration, was the first to react. Her instincts told her that something was wrong long before Kalen had fully processed the situation. She crouched low, her gloved hand reaching for the small blade at her hip. But before she could make a move, a flash of movement caught her eye. It came from above, a shimmer in the air as Luca's cloaked figure descended from a high rock face with silent, deadly grace. He wasn't just waiting for them. He had been watching them, anticipating their every move. Selena barely had time to raise her weapon when a shot rang out, the sharp crack splitting the air. She twisted as the blast grazed her shoulder, a hot wave of pain lancing through her body. The force of the shot sent her sprawling, but she quickly rolled into cover, cursing under her breath. "Ambush!" she shouted, her voice tight with urgency. Graf, whose only form of stealth was his imposing frame and sheer presence, reacted with brute force. He threw himself forward, his energy sword humming to life, a deadly arc of blue light cutting through the dust. He swung it wide, hoping to catch a glimpse of their assailant. But the sniper was already gone, slipping into the rocky terrain as if he were part of it. Kalen knew they had no time to waste. Zero, find him. Now. Zero's fingers danced across his wrist console, and his voice crackled through the comms. He's good. Cloaking tech is far beyond anything I've seen before. We need to flush him out. But Kalen wasn't waiting for a plan anymore. This wasn't a calculated fight. This was survival. The sniper's game. The hunter had become the hunted. From the corner of his eye, Kalen spotted a flicker of movement. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough for someone who had spent his life hunting to notice. Without hesitation, he raised his rifle and fired a single shot. The shot tore through the air and hit the rock, just a few inches from the sniper's last known position. It was a miss, but it wasn't meant to hit. The sniper's cloak rippled for a split second, and that was all Kalen needed. He sprang forward, leading his team into the fray. Selena had recovered, and now she was darting from one piece of cover to another, moving with the kind of speed that made her almost impossible to track. Graf was smashing through boulders, creating diversions, hoping to force the sniper into the open, but the sniper was always one step ahead. The shots came at random intervals, precise, deadly, but always just a fraction off. It was clear Luca wasn't trying to kill them outright. No! This was a game. He was toying with them, watching their every move, reading them like an open book. Zero's voice came again, this time with a hint of frustration. He's adapting faster than I can compensate. We're losing ground. Kalen's patience was thinning. His mind raced as he tracked the sniper's position through the scattering dust and shifting rocks. Luca was a ghost, a figure so skilled at blending into his environment that even with all their technology, he was still nearly impossible to catch. But Kalen was determined. If anyone could bring the sniper down, it was him. The wind kicked up, swirling the dust around them like a living thing. For a moment, the world felt like it had frozen, each breath caught in the stillness before the storm. And then, without warning, it hit. The sniper's shot was like a comet. It tore through the air with terrifying speed, a blur of motion that seemed almost unnatural. Zero's eyes widened as the bolt of energy blasted through his console, sending sparks flying. He cried out, stumbling back, clutching at his now-dead wrist of ice. Zero! Kalen yelled, but there was no time to check on him. No time for hesitation. They were down to just 3, and the sniper was still out there. Selena, take point! Kalen commanded, his voice cold and steady. The woman nodded, her gaze fierce as she darted forward again, positioning herself in the only way she knew how, fast, unpredictable. She was their best hope now. As she moved, Kalen noticed something in her eyes, a flicker of fear, a tinge of doubt that he had never seen before. She was as tough as they came, but even she knew the odds were against them now. From the distance, another shot rang out, but this time it wasn't aimed at them. It was aimed at the ground, just to the side. The sniper was trying to herd them, to force them into his line of fire. Kalen's heart pounded in his chest. He had to end this, and fast. His mind raced as he calculated their positions, the terrain, the sniper's patterns. The Empire had underestimated Luca's striker before. They had sent teams, tech, and elite operatives, all with one goal in mind: kill the sniper. And now, in the heat of the moment, Kalen realized something that made the blood run cold in his veins. Luca wasn't just surviving. He was hunting. With a sudden burst of speed, Kalen broke from cover, charging forward. The sniper's next shot was past him, a fraction of an inch too far. He was close, so close now. Graf, roaring with fury, was right behind him. The brute swung his sword again, cleaving through a boulder. His target wasn't the sniper. It was the stone, the cover, anything that might force Luca into the open. And then, in a flash, it happened. A burst of energy slammed into Graf's chest, throwing him back like a rag doll. His armor sparked and crackled, and then he hit the ground with a sickening thud, unmoving. Kalen felt his stomach twist. Graf was down. They were losing. But the sniper had made a mistake. In that split second of distraction, Kalen spotted him. A fleeting shadow against the rocks, a moment of vulnerability. Kalen didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot rang out, and this time it wasn't a miss. The sniper's form flickered in the air, the cloaking field failing for a brief second. The shot tore through the air and found its mark. Luca fell, his body hitting the ground with a thud, his rifle slipping from his grasp. Kalen stood over him, breathless, heart racing. The hunt was over. The silence that followed the shot felt heavier than the death of their target. It was as if the very air around them had frozen, as if time itself held its breath. Kalen stood over the fallen sniper, his rifle still raised, but his hand shaking ever so slightly. The battle was won, but it felt hollow, the rush of victory replaced by an unfamiliar sense of unease. Luca's striker lay sprawled on the ground, his body unmoving, his cloak now torn and flickering with fading light. The precision of the shot had left no room for doubt. He was dead. But Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that something more had been lost here, something beyond the physical body that now lay before him. Is he? Selena's voice broke through the quiet, her words heavy with the weight of uncertainty. She was crouched behind cover, her hand still tight on the weapon, but her eyes were on Luca, watching his still form. Graf's fall had taken a toll on her as much as it had on Kalen. The hulking figure had been their shield, and without him, everything felt precarious. He's dead, Kalen said, though the words felt wrong. He couldn't bring himself to feel the satisfaction of a kill, even though that was exactly what they had come here for. But it's not the victory I expected. Zero, his face pale from the earlier shock, nodded grimly. He didn't fight like someone who wanted to live. Kalen's gaze shifted to the sniper's body. There had been no final desperate attempt, no explosive reaction as they cornered him. Luca had never fired a final shot to turn the tables. There was only silence, a quiet acceptance in his stillness, as if he had known this would be his end all along. His calculated precision had been nothing but a game, a deadly dance that he had choreographed long before they had arrived. The snipers were not often the ones who died in the stories. The ghosts didn't fade, they persisted. But Luca, he had allowed them to win. Why? Selena asked, her voice softer now, the anger gone. Why did he do it? He had us. He could have killed us all. Why didn't he fight harder? Kalen didn't have an answer. The sniper had always been a shadow, an elusive figure whose legend had grown in the absence of facts. There were rumors, whispers of what Luca had been before he had become the silent killer, but none of it mattered now. What mattered was that, for all the precision and strategy, Luca had chosen not to end this battle in the way they'd all expected. Kalen stepped forward, his boots crunching against the dry ground. He knelt beside the body, looking at the sniper's face, pale, features sharp, eyes closed as though he were simply sleeping. The look was peaceful, almost serene. There was no hatred there, no rage, only an unsettling calm that reminded Kalen of something he had once known, something distant but familiar. This wasn't a fight to him, Kalen muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He wasn't fighting for survival. He was fighting for something else. Or maybe nothing at all. Zero stepped up beside him, scanning the area. Maybe he was just tired of running. We all are, at some point. Kalen's gaze lingered on the body. Tired of running. Was that what this had been? A final, reluctant surrender to the inevitable? Was that why Luca had never fully committed to the kill? Why he had drawn this battle out instead of ending it quickly? The sniper hadn't been hiding because he feared death. No, he had been hiding because he had already died long before the final shot was fired. For a moment, Kalen felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Empathy. The kind of empathy that, as a soldier, he had buried deep within himself. He had seen it all before: the weariness, the toll of endless fighting. Perhaps, in Luca's eyes, the fight had long since ceased to be about survival. Perhaps it had been about something else entirely. You think he ever had a choice? Selena's voice was barely a whisper, as though she, too, had caught a glimpse of that same realization. Or was he always just this? Kalen didn't answer right away. He couldn't. The truth was he didn't know. The legends about Luca had never explained the man behind the myth. They had painted him as a cold-blooded killer, the perfect soldier. But what did that really mean? Had Luca been driven by a need to prove something? To show the Empire that even their best assassins could be brought down? Or had he, like so many before him, become a product of the endless war, a soul lost in a cycle of violence he could never escape? The wind picked up again, stirring the dust around them, and for a brief moment, Kalen thought he heard a faint voice on the breeze, a voice that wasn't just Luca's, but the voices of everyone who had ever been swallowed by this war. A soldier's death, Kalen realized, was often not a clean thing. It wasn't just about the moment of the kill. It was the aftermath, the questions left behind, the ghost that followed you even when the battle ended. And as he stood there, looking at the fallen sniper, Kalen understood something crucial. No one ever truly wins this kind of war. No one is ever truly free from it. He straightened up, his rifle still in hand, and for a moment, he didn't feel like a hunter or a killer. He felt like a man who had seen the cost of his own choices too clearly. "We should go," he said finally, his voice more tired than it had been in years. "The Empire will be expecting a report. There's nothing more to be done here." Selena gave him a long, hard look, but she said nothing. Zero simply nodded, though his eyes betrayed something Kalen couldn't quite place. Perhaps the same sense of unease that lingered in him. As the team began to move away, Kalen took one last look at Luca's still form. The sniper's legend would live on, no doubt, but now there was no mystery left to uncover. In the end, Luca had not been defeated by their superior force, by their tactics or their technology. No, he had defeated himself, long before they had ever set foot on this barren rock. The wind howled again, carrying with it the last whispers of a man who had once been more than just a shadow.